Sidoarjo Regency, East Java, Indonesia. Year 2008. The sky above Kalatenga village hung dark and starless, as if covered by a thick black cloth that allowed no glimmer of light through. That Friday Kliwon night felt colder than usual. A breeze from the north carried the scent of damp earth, mixed with the sharp stench of decaying jasmine flowers. The village was silent. Even the chirping of crickets was absent. Yet from afar, the faint clinking of metal could be heard, accompanied by the rhythmic sound of wooden wheels, though no one in the village had owned a horse-drawn carriage for decades. Sulastri, a 68-year-old widow, sat at her window weaving a coverlet. Her hands trembled, not from age, but from an ominous feeling that had gripped her chest since the afternoon. This old wooden house, left behind by her late husband, stood by the edge of a rice field embankment, right along a path once frequently used by newlyweds returning from the Midodareni ceremony. Now the road lay abandoned, overgrown with wild grass, and regarded by villagers as a death corridor. Suddenly, a small bell began to ring, its rhythm slow, tinkling, tinkling, as though something heavy was approaching, stomping the ground, pressing down the night air. Sulastri held her breath. She turned off the small kerosene lamp on the table, then pushed aside the curtain with her rough fingertips. And there it was. She saw it. A black horse with glowing red eyes pulling an old wooden carriage, its paint peeling. On it sat two figures. One was a man whose head was wrapped in burial cloth, the other a woman wearing a worn white kabaya dress stained brown with dirt and blood. Their faces were unclear, but their bodies did not touch the ground. Sulastri screamed, but her voice vanished into the night silence. The carriage passed slowly in front of her house, and when its wooden wheels touched the ground before her gate, the air around Sulastri suddenly froze. The flame in the kerosene lamp went out on its own, and the curtains fluttered wildly even though all the windows were tightly shut. "Lo, lo, Astagfirullah," she whispered repeatedly while crouching, her body trembling uncontrollably. She dared not look again. But the sounds, the clinking bell, the thud of wooden wheels, and the soft weeping of a woman, echoed endlessly in her ears. A cry that didn't come from any living person. When the sound of the carriage finally faded at the end of the road leading to the rice fields, Sulastri collapsed weakly onto the wooden floor. Her body was soaked in cold sweat. Yet before she could recite a prayer, a yellowish letter slid under the door. Sulastri opened it slowly. Inside, written in dripping red ink like blood, were the words, "Do not ignore the sound of the carriage, because tonight, we are not the only ones passing by." The old paper was neatly folded, yet it felt warm in Sulastri's hands, warm like the body of a living person. She shivered as she whispered istighfar over and over again. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat quietly in a corner of her house, her eyes fixed on the door that had delivered a message of death. Meanwhile, in Surabaya city, two men sat in a legendary coffee stall in Wonokromo. Smoke curled between piles of old newspapers and an open laptop filled with investigative documents. Zulfikar Abiyasa, an investigative journalist with a sharp face and piercing gaze, sipped his coffee slowly. Across from him sat Bambang Santoso, a fellow fighter and former crime journalist who now worked freelance, often chasing strange cases never covered by mainstream media. "If this letter really comes from who we think it does," Zulfikar muttered, lifting a grimy envelope that smelled faintly of decay, "then we're stepping onto old ground that's never dried from blood." The envelope had arrived earlier that day. No sender's name. Only a red marker scrawl on the front, for those brave enough to unearth what's buried. Inside was an old sepia-toned photograph, a young couple riding a decorated carriage adorned with yellow palm leaves. Their smiles were stiff, forced. Behind them, blurred, stood two men in safari uniforms. "Retnasari Ariani and Rahadian Satmoko," Bambang said softly. "They died in Kalatenga in 1983, supposedly in a carriage accident." Supposedly, Zulfikar repeated coldly. But look at this. He handed over a newspaper clipping dated June 12, 1983, from the Regional Library Archives. The headline read, "Newlyweds die as carriage tips over in rice field," but at the bottom was a red pen mark, "Not overturned. Murdered." We saw it. R. Bambang raised an eyebrow. R. Ratnasari? Who knows, Zulfikar replied. But one thing is certain. Kalatenga village has never been silent, especially every Friday Kliwon night. And we need to go there. Their journey cut through the fading daylight. The old rented car roared along Surabaya's streets heading south toward Sidoarjo. The sky turned red, split by the call to Maghrib prayer. The wind began to carry the briny scent and muddy stench from Porong. Arriving in Tanggulangan sub-district, they briefly stopped in Ketapang village. Bambang led Zulfikar to visit an ex-village chief mentioned years ago in a land dispute report. Yet the village felt tense. Houses turned off their lights early. The nighttime wooden alarm rang faster than usual. They knocked on a house by the roadside. A middle-aged man named Pak Darto opened the door, looking anxious. "Don't mention the carriage here, brother," he whispered the moment Zulfikar said Rahadian's name. "But we received information that the accident wasn't normal," Bambang said gently. "We just want to know the truth. We won't disturb anyone." Pak Darto glanced around before ushering them inside. His living room was filled with old photos and dusty frames. In the center hung a painting of a carriage flanked by two buffalo heads. "Accident," he murmured. "There was no accident here." They were silenced. "Because of the land." "Please tell us," Zulfikar urged. Pak Darto took a deep breath. Ratnasari and Rahadian came from two large families who owned vast rice fields in Kalatenga and Porong. In the 1980s, a new rich man from Surabaya named Bagus Bumi, a property developer, wanted to buy their land to build an elite housing complex. But both families refused. They said the land was ancestral inheritance, not for sale. Zulfikar and Bambang exchanged glances. A week after the refusal, Retno and Rahadian got married. They rode a carriage from Kalatenga to Porong. But that night, they vanished on the road. The next morning, they were found burned in a rice field. The carriage caught fire. Back then, the police said the brakes failed. But there were no burn marks on the front wheels. And since that time, Pak Darto whispered, "Every Friday Kliwon night, the sound of the carriage returns. But only those about to die can see its passengers." Silence blanketed the room. Suddenly, from outside the house, came a faint sound, creeing, like an old bell being shaken slowly. They froze. Pak Darto gripped his prayer beads. Zulfikar slowly stood and peeked out the window. No one was there. But on the muddy ground in front of the house, there were two fresh round-wheel tracks that hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. Zulfikar swallowed hard. The light from the hanging lamp on Pak Darto's porch flickered dimly, as if trying to avoid something unseen. A light drizzle had begun to fall, soaking the mysterious tracks left behind, but their shape remained clear, perfectly round with broken lines in the center like the imprints of ancient wooden wheel spokes. "Mr. Bambang, come back inside," urged Pak Darto in a hurried whisper, his face pale and lifeless. "The tracks have appeared again. That means they're wandering, searching for something." Zulfikar glanced once more. Amid the soft wind and gentle raindrops, he heard a faint sound slipping through banana leaves, a woman's weeping, distant, calling from the west. The three of them returned inside. Pak Darto shut the door tightly and lit some incense. Usually, they just pass by. But if what they're looking for is close, they might stay longer than they should. Zulfikar sat cross-legged on the cold wooden floor, opening his laptop to jot down everything he'd just heard. Yet his mind was unsettled. That whisper wasn't just a sound. It felt like it had crept into his thoughts, scratching at something long buried. The night grew deeper. The rain had stopped, but thick dew clung to the window glass. The air inside Pak Darto's house turned colder than before, not the usual chill, but one that pierced to the bone, like air rising from a grave. Pak Darto had fallen asleep in his chair, prayer beads still clenched in his hand. Bambang dozed off on the mat. Only Zulfikar remained awake. He closed his eyes, hoping for a brief rest. But it was precisely in that half-conscious state that the crying returned, closer, more real, not from outside the house, but from behind. From the kitchen. Zulfikar opened his eyes. There was no sound. Slowly, he got up, switched on the flashlight on his phone, and walked toward the back of the house. The kitchen was dark. Only the dim moonlight filtered through cracks in the bamboo walls. There stood a small door leading to the backyard, and an old stone well. An old stone well, its mouth covered with a rusty sheet of corrugated metal, surrounded by wild shrubs. The sound came again. This time clearly. A woman's voice, softly weeping, sobbing, as if wounded or forgotten. Zulfikar approached the well. His steps were quiet, but his breath quickened. And when he lifted the rusted metal plate covering the well's mouth, a blast of cold air surged upward, carrying a sharp, foul smell, like stale blood. Then he saw her. A female figure slowly emerged from the darkness at the bottom of the well. Not climbing, not jumping, but floating, slowly, as if pulled from beyond time. Her face was beautiful, yet pale and hollow. Her long hair flowed freely, partially covering her features. She wore a torn white bridal kabaya, ripped at the shoulder and stomach. In her hands, she held a bundle of wilted jasmine flowers. Zulfikar froze. His lips tried to utter a prayer, but no sound came out. The figure raised her face. Her eyes were white and empty, without pupils, yet fixed straight on Zulfikar. Then, her lips moved, silently. But Zulfikar heard it directly in his mind. "Please, tell the truth." He collapsed onto the ground. Sudden images flooded his mind, a carriage moving at night, chased by a large truck from behind, screams, shouts, laughter from men in safari uniforms, the crack of a whip, and fire. Rahadian dragged from the carriage, beaten, then burned along with his vehicle. Ratnasari tried to run, but her hair was yanked, her mouth stuffed with palm leaves, and thrown alive into the well. Zulfikar trembled. He cried without realizing it. His body shook violently as he leaned against the edge of the well, clutching his head. The voice kept echoing in his mind, "Uncover, uncover, uncover." The next morning, Bambang found Zulfikar sitting silently in the backyard, his face pale and eyes swollen. "What happened to you?" Bambang asked anxiously. Zulfikar didn't answer immediately. He pointed to the well now sealed once again. I met her." "Who?" "Ratnasari." Zulfikar stared at Bambang with hollow eyes. "She's not at peace, Bang. She wants the truth told. They were murdered, not an accident. And she showed me who did it." "Who?" Zulfikar answered quietly, almost whispering. "Bagus Bumi, and a police officer ranked Brigadier General." Bambang swallowed hard. The warm morning air suddenly felt heavy like a death fog. And far across the rice fields of Kalatenga, faintly, the sound of an old bell rang again. As though the spirit had just opened her mouth, and the story long buried beneath the earth was finally beginning to rise. The morning over Kalatenga village was wrapped in a thin layer of dew and fog that refused to lift. Zulfikar stared at the empty rice fields, which had been filled with whispers and images of death the night before. His mind still wrestled between logic and reality. Everything he had seen in the well last night, the figure of Ratnasari, flashes of burning fire, the laughter of men in safari shirts, was too vivid to be called just a dream. Bambang sat on Pak Dardo's porch, sipping black coffee, watching his friend who still seemed dazed. "We have to keep going, Zul," he said. "Whatever you saw, it was a clue. We need to prove this isn't just a hallucination." Zulfikar nodded slowly. He could still smell the foul stench from the backyard well. As if Ratnasari's spirit hadn't truly left. It had only moved, waiting for them to act. According to Ratnasari's message, the key to unlocking this old secret was Bagus Bumi and a senior police officer ranked Brigadier General. That final name made Bambang's skin crawl. In the 1970s, there weren't many high-ranking officers capable of manipulating autopsy reports or altering news about an accident. One name surfaced in old archives: Brigadier General Joko Mulyono. They returned to Surabaya to dig deeper. In the old newsroom where Bambang still had access, they reopened digital folders containing reports from 1983. The name Bagasbumi Danuwiro appeared in several land dispute reports in the Tanggulangan, Porong area. The man was a major property figure, owning dozens of strategic plots of land, including some bought at unusually low prices. "Wait," said Zulfikar, pointing to an almost overlooked article. "Look at this. Incident of land grabbing in Gablak Hamlet. Farmers disappeared after refusing to sign." The name of the thug mentioned: Sarman. 2 days later, they arrived at Pelita Casey Nursing Home on the outskirts of Gresik. A staff member greeted them with confusion when the name Sarman was mentioned. "Oh, Mr. Sarman is still here. But lately, he's been acting strange. Talks to himself often. Says he's being chased by a ghost train. He lives in room 12, the staff whispered. Zulfikar knocked softly, then opened the door to room 12. Inside, a frail old man with red eyes sat in a wheelchair, trembling hands clutching a blurry image of a wooden carriage. "Mr. Sarman, we're journalists. We want to know the truth about the Kalatenga carriage accident in 1983, Bambang said gently. Sarman gave a short laugh. "You're late. They've already come before you. Please, sir. We know it wasn't an accident. We know Rahadian and Ratnasari were murdered." Sarman froze. His mouth trembled. His hands gripped the picture of the carriage until it tore. "We were just ordered," he whispered. "We were only following orders. Bagasbumi arranged everything. He said those newlyweds were obstacles. Those lands had to belong to him. If necessary, taken by fire." "What did you do?" Zulfikar pressed. Sarman lowered his head. "We hit them from behind. The carriage shattered. We dragged it into the field. We tied Rahadian to the seat, poured gasoline, and burned him alive. Ratnasari, she ran. But Joko took care of her. She was thrown into the old well. So there would be no witnesses." Bambang gripped Sarman's wheelchair. "Which Joko? Brigadier General Joko Mulyono?" Sarman didn't answer, but his eyes suddenly darted outside the window in terror. His breathing quickened. His body shook. "They are here," he whispered. "You brought them here?" "They followed from Kalatenga." Zulfikar and Bambang turned toward the window. No one was there. But a faint clinking sound could be heard. A sound unmistakable. That night, Sarman was found dead in his room. His eyes wide open, his body frozen in a sitting position as though bound. On the floor of his room, written in blood, "One has spoken. One must pay." Bambang and Zulfikar sat silently in their car. The road from Gresik to Surabaya was quiet, but the night air felt thick. "He mentioned Joko," said Bambang. "We have to find Joko Mulyono before we become next." Zulfikar looked out the window. For a moment, he thought he saw two figures standing in the middle of the road reflected in the glass. But when he turned around, nothing. Just the empty street. Yet the soft clinking of the carriage bell never seemed to fade away. Ding, ding, ding. Zulfikar glanced at the rearview mirror, narrowing his eyes. The asphalt road behind them was empty, yet that sound, the soft clinking of a small metal bell from an old carriage, continued to follow like a shadow no headlights could cut through. He took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel as if the noise would vanish if he ignored it. But instead, it grew louder. The clinking seemed stuck in their ears, gentle yet piercing through bone. And with every turn they took, the road became more unfamiliar, eerily deserted, as though they had stepped off the map entirely. Bambang stared at the blank GPS screen. The signal had vanished 15 minutes ago. The digital map now only showed a gray circle with no street names. "Zul, are you sure this is the way to Reno Canongo?" Pac Dardo said this old village road connects there. "But it looks like it hasn't been used in years," Zulfikar replied, eyes sharp on the bamboo shadows lining both sides of the road. They were traveling along an ancient path dividing Kalatenga and Reno Canongo, a village once known for its fertile land and golden rice fields. Yet now, the village had nearly vanished from conversation, as if swallowed by Lapindo's mud, or something far older than mud. Half an hour later, they arrived at a red brick gate overgrown with weeds. Faded letters read, "Selamat datang di Reno Canongo." Welcome to Reno Canongo. But the word Canongo was cracked, leaving only "Run, go," like a name never finished by fate. Inside, the atmosphere changed dramatically. Old houses stood crooked, paint peeling, windows hanging broken. Wind howled, carrying the scent of damp earth and the remains of incense. There was no human voice, no chickens, no life. But all the house doors were half open. "It's like the village knows we've come," Bambang whispered, shivering. They parked near a collapsed security post. Zulfikar decided to walk, his camera slung around his neck. They followed a narrow alleyway and finally found an old stilted house with faded writing, Warung Retno, Retno's shop. "Is this her family's house?" Bambang asked. Zulfikar nodded. He touched the door, it creaked open on its own. Inside, everything was still arranged, a wooden table, empty jars, a tilted rattan chair. On the wall hung a black and white photo, a newlywed couple on a carriage decorated with palm leaves. "Retnasari and Rahadian," Zulfikar whispered. "This is their family home. And this is where the tragedy began." Bambang walked toward the back of the house, into the kitchen. He stared at the moss-covered brick fireplace. But when he stepped closer, he noticed something on the floor, fresh wooden wheel marks. Two parallel lines, very recent. And suddenly, from the ceiling above, came a creaking sound, like wood being dragged, the sound of wheels, and a faint ringing of a bell, as if something was moving overhead. Bambang looked up. His heart almost stopped. Above him, clinging to the ceiling like dead lizards, were two figures wrapped in burial cloths. They were motionless. But slowly, their heads turned downward, and their pitch-black white eyes fixed on him. Bambang stumbled backward. Zulfikar yanked him out of the kitchen. They ran outside, panting hard, but the sound of the bell followed, growing faster, sharper, like a scream without a voice. Just as they crossed the front yard, an old man emerged from behind tall grass. His clothes were torn, his skin dark brown like tree bark, and his eyes were completely white. "You came too late," he rasped. "Who are you?" Zulfikar gasped. "My name is Kasimin. I am the guardian of the village cemetery. I know they've been waiting for people like you." "Who are they?" Kasimin stepped closer, his whisper cutting into their ears. "The bride and groom. They won't stay silent. They want everyone who did wrong to return to where they belong. And the only place evil belongs is wet soil and nights that never see morning." Kasimin led them to the back of the village, toward an overgrown old graveyard. He pointed to two unnamed stone graves, separated but side by side, marked only by tattered burial cloths. "These aren't official graves. They were buried secretly. The police called it a simple accident. But me, I was the one who saw what their bodies looked like when they were found." His eyes welled with tears. Rahadian had no face left, burnt beyond recognition. As for Retnasari, she was still breathing when pulled from the well. But that night, her body was thrown into an unmarked grave, on orders from a senior officer. And that businessman bribed everyone. Except me. "Bagasbumi Danuwairo and Joko Mulyono," Zulfikar murmured. Kasimin nodded. "Joko retired long ago. But 5 years ago, he had a stroke. He can't speak. And every Friday Kliwon night, he cries without reason." Zulfikar took out his audio recorder. Kasimin, if their spirits are still here, will they speak? Kasimin gazed at the sky. They don't speak with mouths. They speak with signs. And tonight, there will be a big sign. Faintly, from the edge of the village, the bell rang again. But this time, it was followed by the crack of a whip, and the laughter of a woman, sharp, broken, full of vengeance. The sky above Reno Kanongo darkened. Leaves began to fall, and in the distance, the thundering hooves of horses struck the ground like drums of death. Zulfikar and Bambang hurriedly left the old cemetery, accompanied by Kasimin's limping but fearless steps. Every sound that reached their ears now felt like a warning, like the final ticking seconds before a curse finally descended. And when they reached the edge of the village, the road they had just taken suddenly vanished. Fog swallowed the earth. Reno Kanongo seemed trapped between the world of the living and the dead. "This is a sign they are already enraged," said Kasimin in a whisper. "And there is only one thing that can return them to their place. The main perpetrator must see the truth with his own eyes, before his eyes are closed forever." Zulfikar restarted their car, which was covered in thick dew. The wipers worked hard to clear the windshield, but the fog refused to lift. They took the eastern exit from the village, and only after 3 kilometers did the GPS signal return. Their next destination was clear, the home of Brigadier General, Ret. Joko Mulyono, the high-ranking officer suspected of involvement in Ratnasari's disappearance. The last known address, Aram Sari Housing Complex, Block F8, an elite residential area in Sidoarjo, now nearly silent, as many homes had been abandoned due to ground subsidence caused by hot mud. House number F8 stood firm, yet all its windows were tightly shut behind thick curtains. No sound came from inside, except for the faint hum of a breathing machine echoing from the living room. Zulfikar pressed the doorbell. No answer. He tried again. This time, the sound of an old wooden door creaked open slowly, by itself. "Assalamu alaikum, Pak Joko?" Bambang called out as he stepped inside. The room smelled of medicine and camphor. In the middle of the living room sat an elderly man in a wheelchair, wearing a faded white pajama. His eyes were open, but empty. His body appeared stiff. An oxygen tube was attached to his nose. "Sir, we're from the media," said Zulfikar. "We want to talk about the case from 1973, about Rahadian and Ratnasari." There was no reaction. Zulfikar moved closer and gently touched the old man's shoulder. "Brock." The living room light suddenly went out. Only the small desk lamp in the corner remained on, casting a trembling yellow glow like a candle flickering in the wind. Suddenly, Joko's mouth moved. Slowly, without sound. But Zulfikar heard him. Just like when Ratnasari spoke from the bottom of the well. Directly into his mind. "You have awakened them, they will not leave until blood is paid with blood." Joko's eyes suddenly bulged wide. His body trembled violently. His wheelchair shook. Bambang panicked, running to find help. But as he opened the back door, a loud noise echoed from the living room. "Brock." Zulfikar rushed back, and froze. The wheelchair was empty. The body of Joko Mulyono was gone. But above, exactly like what Bambang saw in Retno's house, 2 figures hung from the ceiling, dressed in tattered wedding clothes and burial shrouds. This time, one of them lowered its face slowly towards Zulfikar. It wasn't Ratnasari. Not Rahadian. It was Joko Mulyono. A face that now had no eyes, only black hollow sockets continuously dripping blood. Zulfikar screamed. Yet his body wouldn't move. And as the bell rang, the room went completely dark. Joko Mulyono was found the next day by the housemaid who arrived at noon. He was dead, hanging from the ceiling upside down like a bat, tied by a white burial cloth around his feet. On his chest was carved a wound shaped like palm leaves, and a message scratched in blood. "I bound her in the well. Now I too am bound." Outside the house, Zulfikar and Bambang sat lifelessly on the hood of their car. Their bodies trembled, faces pale. "We've seen 3 deaths now," Bambang whispered. "Sarman. Joko. Who's next tomorrow?" Zulfikar looked westward. The sun was beginning to set. It was Thursday afternoon. That meant tonight was Friday Kliwon. "Bagus Bumi Danuwiro," Zulfikar answered. Only him left. And they knew, tonight, the carriage would return. Not just to pass by, but to come for someone. The sky above Sidoarjo began to darken faster than usual, as if the night was forcing its way in before time. Thick clouds gathered in the west, bringing a heavy pressure that weighed on the chest. Cold wind blew in, carrying the scent of mud and burning incense. Amid distant thunder, a small bell rang faintly, nearly like an echo from the past. Zulfikar and Bambang realized this Friday Kliwon night was no ordinary night. This was the final retrieval night. Only one name remained, one face, Bagus Bumi Danuwiro, the property tycoon who had evaded punishment for 5 decades, living comfortably behind high walls and political protection. But tonight, no wall, no matter how tall, could stop the carriage from the spirit world. The two drove toward Bukit Cempaka housing complex, an exclusive area in northern Sidoarjo. In Block B1 stood a 3-story colonial-style modern house, its iron gate closed and guarded by 2 neatly dressed security guards. They immediately refused entry when Zulfikar and Bambang's names were mentioned. But Zulfikar was clever. He handed the guard a flash drive and said firmly, "If Mr. Bagas doesn't take this tonight, tomorrow morning the video will be on YouTube with 1 million views." The guard hesitated. Then one of them disappeared into the house. A few minutes later, the gate slowly creaked open. They were received in the living room. The air smelled overly perfumed, as if trying to mask something beneath, a subtle but sharp metallic odor. In the corner sat an elderly man with a broad face, rings on all 5 fingers, and a glossy batik shirt. "Bagus Bumi Danuwiro. So you're the journalists?" His voice deep and slippery. "What do you want?" "I'm too old to be disturbed by stories from the past." "We don't want your money, Pak," Bambang replied. "We just want you to tell the truth. About Retnasari Ariani and Rahadian Satmoko." Bagus Bumi's face stiffened. "Nonsense. It was just an accident. Everything was settled 50 years ago." Zulfikar turned on his phone. He showed the audio recording of Sarman. Then the photo of Joko Mulyono found hanging. And finally, a short video clip from their camera at Retno's house, showing 2 shrouded figures hanging from the ceiling. Bagus Bumi didn't move. But his face started to pale. "They're coming tonight, Pak," whispered Zulfikar. And this time, not to warn, but to take. Bagus Bumi stood up. "Get out. This is my house." "Security." Bambang stared deeply into the old man's eyes. "No need to call anyone. They're already at the gate." Suddenly, the lights in the house went out. Total darkness filled every room. A loud bell clanged from outside the window. Crying, crying, crying. The sound of horse hooves echoed, slow, thudding against the paving stones in the yard. Dum, dum, dum. Bagus Bumi froze. His hands trembled. Through the window, silhouettes of wooden wheels and white-clothed figures sitting upright appeared. The carriage arrived without a driver, yet still moved forward. And this time, it stopped right in front of the house. Faintly, 2 figures rose from within the carriage. Retnasari and Rahadian. Their eyes were empty, but their faces turned straight toward Bagus Bumi. No screams. No words. Just one slow movement. Their hands reached out, calling him. Suddenly, a gust of wind slammed the door open wide. Cold air rushed inside. The chandelier crashed to the floor, shattering. The wall mirror cracked into 1,000 pieces. Bagus Bumi tried to run, but his feet were rooted to the ground like they were nailed. His body convulsed. His left hand gripped his chest, and from his mouth came a scream, not human, but something resembling the sound of a whip being snapped hard. Crack! Bagus Bumi lifted off the floor. His eyes bulged wide, and somehow he was suddenly outside, sitting atop the carriage, flanked by the two shrouded bride and groom figures. His face screamed, but no sound came out. The bell rang once more. The carriage slowly rolled away into the dark road and vanished into the fog at the end of the alley, swallowed by the night mist. The next morning, the residents of the housing complex were in shock. Bagus Bumi Danuwairo had disappeared without a trace. There were no CCTV recordings, no wheel marks. Only one thing remained in front of his house: a single yellow palm leaf soaked in blood, and on the gate, written in black charcoal, "We have been retrieved. No one else needs to wait." But this story is not over. Zulfikar and Bambang sat back in their car, staring at the reddening dawn sky. They didn't know whether to feel relieved or afraid. "We've finished everything," Bambang said quietly. Zulfikar shook his head. "Not yet. We've only delivered their voices. But who listens? Who cares when they weren't the powerful ones?" Bambang looked at him. "Then we make this our report. Not just writing, but a documentary. Video. Evidence. So the entire nation knows that crimes buried in silence will dig themselves free." And from far away, the final bell rang, softly, as if saying goodbye. 3 weeks after that last Friday Kliwon night, the atmosphere of Kalatenga village slowly returned to normal, quiet, but no longer oppressive. Morning dew clung to rice leaves, the wind gently moved through the fields, and the chirping of crickets at night was no longer interrupted by the silent ringing of unseen bells. Yet at the edge of the old cemetery, beneath a sawo tree whose leaves always fell regardless of the season, stood 2 new gravestones. Simple, moss-covered, yet clean and well-kept. Between them, an old man sat cross-legged, burning incense and placing a bundle of jasmine flowers. He had personally reburied the old graves of Retnasari and Rahadian, moving them to proper ground, with real tombstones, true prayers, and honest remorse. And right in the center between the 2 graves, lay a single yellow palm leaf. Still fresh. Still fragrant, like it had just been picked from a wedding altar. Yet at its tip, a dark red drop lingered, not blood from any body, but blood from time itself, from pain and vengeance finally finding peace. Zulfikar and Bambang stood a few steps behind. They remained silent, allowing Kasimin to finish his prayer. When the old man rose, he turned to them with calm eyes. "They won't return again," he said. "Because you listened. And because you wrote." 1 month later, an investigative documentary titled "The Bride and Groom's Carriage, Murdered Dreams and the Curse of Blood-Stained Land" was released on their self-made independent YouTube channel. The 1-hour video included interview clips, archival photos, Sarman's audio recording, footage of the night at Retno's house, and faint glimpses of the ghostly carriage under the rain-soaked sky. It didn't take long for the video to go viral. Comments flooded in. Many viewers felt chills down their spine. Some cried. Others refused to believe. But more than anything, many began to ask questions. How many stories like this are buried beneath our soil? How many lives have been erased by forged land certificates? How many spirits still wait for someone to rewrite their story? That night, Zulfikar stared at his laptop screen, accompanied by the familiar, now comforting sound of crickets, no longer a sign of terror. He took a deep breath and opened a new folder on his desktop. Title: The Bloody Trembisai Tree in Jombang. Bambang entered the room holding 2 cups of coffee. "Ready for the next story?" Zulfikar smiled. "There are still many spirits in this land who don't have a grave. We're just the writers who help them find home." Under the drizzling sky of East Java, the carriage, once carrying the unjustly dead, had finally returned to the earth. Its wooden wheel stopped. Its bell grew silent. The once scented palm leaf of marriage had now grown into a symbol of regret. Sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't a ghost, but a human who fears no evil. And sometimes, the only way to calm a spirit is to tell their story, truthfully, to the world. Thank you for listening to this real horror story. Don't forget, like this video if you felt chills like we did while writing it. Subscribe for more eerie, mysterious, and dark investigative tales from the lands of Nusantara. Share this story with your friends. Maybe someone has also heard the sound of the carriage on a Friday Kliwon night. Comment below, does your village also hold a forgotten story waiting to be told? See you in the next chapter. Nusantara Nightmares, behind the silence, lies a scream unheard.